Welcome back to World 360's special presentation, World at War. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists who are joining me today. Peter Zalmayev, a political analyst in Ukraine. He's also the director of Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Fred Weir, he's a Russian political affairs expert. And Michael Kugelman, who's the director of South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining in on my show. Now, Peter, if I may begin with you, winter is here. And the prospects of a health crisis are already looming large in Ukraine. What is life like inside Ukraine, especially for the women and children?
Well, it is obviously it's not a new reality we're having to adopt to, but it's happening gradually. It comes and goes, fits and starts. There are days when the electricity is down for long stretches of time. Luckily, most residents of Kiev, where I am, the capital, still have water and heat, and those are the most important things, obviously. Mm-hmm. But yes, with every missile attack from Russia, more and more of our critical infrastructure gets destroyed. There is a possibility that if this keeps up, there will be another outflux of people to Europe, overwhelming the welfare systems there. And Europe and the West are also aware of this. That's why they've stepped up their efforts to defend Ukraine by giving Ukraine air defense systems. And obviously the latest is that the US will be providing its state-of-the-art Patriot system.
Right, I'm going to come to that. In the meantime, Fred, if I could bring you in, despite the winter, Putin wants to pursue the war, knowing the situation in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson is very difficult. Why so?
Well, it's very hard to say what's going to happen, but Russia has reconstituted its army. It has brought a couple hundred thousand more troops. One hears about Ukrainian winter offensives as well. Once the ground hardens and the foliage is gone from the trees, it does favor a war of mobility. And attackers have more advantages if they're prepared for the winter. So I think we can expect some very dramatic events this winter and perhaps decisive ones.
Fred, do you agree that a total military victory is unlikely for both Russia or Ukraine?
This is what people say. It certainly looks like World War I. If you see the images from Bakhmut, the fighting that's going on there, it's a war of attrition. And both sides seem to be quite determined at this point. All the Russian expectations that Ukraine would collapse have come to naught, but the reverse is true too. The Russians are proving not to collapse, not to fall apart. There doesn't seem to be any threat to Putin's hold in the Kremlin, and they're reconstituting their army.
Michael, thank you for waiting your turn so patiently. Now, with fresh worries over a COVID surge in 5 countries, including China, Korea and Japan, how do you see the war exacerbating the challenges in 2023, especially for South Asian economies?
Well, indeed. First of all, thanks for having me. I think that the big question is what the wider economic impact of this ongoing war will be for the South Asian economies and for economies around the world. I mean, we saw over the last year there were 2 major external factors that impacted economies in the region. One was the supply chain shocks associated with the pandemic. The other was the war in Ukraine. The pandemic appears to be receding, so I think that challenge will be manageable economically. But indeed, as we've just heard, the war in Ukraine is not about to end anytime soon, and I think that raises important questions for countries in the region. Certainly those like Sri Lanka and Pakistan that have been particularly vulnerable to the major impacts on global energy prices and commodity costs. We've seen how that's played out in so many countries economically around the world over the last year. And the longer the war rages on, the longer it will be for these economies to right their ships. And it's for Europe as well. We talk about how the European countries have largely been on the same page with the U.S. and Japan and Australia as well, and pushing back against what Russia's done. But Europe, many countries in Europe continue to be dependent on energy, oil in Russia. And with winter upon us, I think that's going to be an even more significant factor. So, yeah, bottom line, as long as this war rages on in Ukraine, There's going to the stress on so many economies in South Asia, but beyond as well, will remain entrenched.
That's true. That's true. I'm afraid I'm running short of time. Peter, if I could end with you. At a time when the United States is set to send the Patriots, as you mentioned earlier, how significant is Zelensky's U.S. visit for this war?
Yeah, this is very, very significant. It's already being compared. He's being compared to Churchill. This is a Churchillian moment because obviously Ukrainians understand the human psychology is such that people forget, people want to move on, people prefer to forget. The war is still very much hot. The war is raging. And so the Zelensky's task will be to make sure that the Western attention, the attention of the U.S., does not flag.
Right.
This is an existential war. This is a war that Lloyd Austin and Secretary General of the US, of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, have all said will determine the rest of the 21st century, the security architecture of our century. And you know what? Ukrainians standing firm despite all the privations, despite all these attacks, the terrorism against civilians. We stand firm. We are not about to bend down. We will continue to resist.
And Fred, I'm going to wrap, but I give you 30 seconds to react to how do you anticipate Putin responding, considering Zelensky's visit is bound to provoke him further?
I think Putin had a big meeting with his military establishment today. He made it very clear that Russia intends to continue and to step up its war in Ukraine. I don't see any political changes on either side now, and unfortunately, I see little chance of any kind of peaceful movement toward peace in the near future at all.
All right. Many thanks to you, gentlemen. With that, it brings me to the end of this show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back same time next week. Stay tuned to see you.